This is the On the Pony Express podcast, part of the On3 network. Check out all the SMU coverage you need at ontheponyexpress.com. Now, here's your host, Billy Embody.
1, 2, 3, let me go.
Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the On the Pony Express podcast. I'm Billy Embody. Thanks for joining us. It is a great time to be at ontheponyexpress.com, and that's because the Mustangs are in the college football playoffs. So try On the Pony Express for just $1 for your first week and get all the transfer portal scoop that you could need. As look, it is time for SMU to make a push for a national championship, but they do have visitors on campus for the transfer portal as well. And we've got to have SMU fans covered on that front. Who is Rhett Lashley and his staff going to get next to retool this roster? We'll cover all of that at ontheponyexpress.com. Before we get going on our podcast breaking down SMU Clemson with Hayden Howerton, do have to remind you guys, we are presented by our friends at StatusJet. StatusJet.com is the place to go for you guys to plan your trip for State College. Look, this is the trip of all trips to use StatusJet and use code PonyUpACC for a discount on that round trip. Look, it is incredibly hard to get to. And this is the trip to go in the morning of. Had somebody reach out on the site, they're leaving at 6 a.m. They land in State College, 10 minutes from campus, and then they're out that night and they're sleeping in their own bed. And they're probably breaking even for what it would cost to do it commercially with hotels and all those things. So go to statusjet.com, reach out to David Henry and his team today and get the discount with code PonyUpACC for your trip today. So that is the place to use it. Trust me, StatusJet will take care of you guys. So check them out and plan your trip for SMU's college football playoff appearance today. And pleased to be joined now by a fellow live show host from over there in Clutch at Charlotte, Hayden Howerton. Hayden, look, the result, the ACC Championship game, 34-31, SMU falls, wasn't the result that anyone wanted to see on the SMU side of things. But first of all, we did have a blast with all of our fans before that game. So we've got to give them a special shout out.
Yeah, thanks for everybody showing up. That was such a fun event. It was so awesome hanging out with y'all, having some brews pregame. You know, that was a cool place to be. And, man, there were Clemson fans all over, but that was the one SMU spot where, you know, I saw the foam pony hats, you know, and I went back right before the game too. And, I mean, that thing was packed to the gills. But thanks, you guys, for showing up. That was really awesome. Hope we get to do something like that again soon.
Yeah, hope so too. We'll keep you guys in the loop if there are any more future events coming. But let's get down to it with the game. SMU falls 34-31, and look, it was as heartbreaking as it could be, and I compared it to, you know, Friday Night Lights, the movie. You know, you're right there, you're battling back, you were down early, and you think you've written the storybook ending, and you just fall short, and football comes down to a couple different plays that define a game. And early in the game, there were some game-defining plays and game-defining missed calls as well. And at the end of the game, it came down to a couple plays because of SMU's resiliency. And unfortunately, those plays went Clemson's way.
Unfortunately, Clemson brought the experience of playing in an ACC championship. They're one of these teams that have just been around. They've played for national championships recently, and, you know, they've won national championships. Dabo is extremely experienced with games like that. He's been around the college football landscape now. He's been in blowouts one side and the other and everything in between. But obviously a heartbreaker. I'm still upset about it, to be honest with y'all, and I probably will be until about this time next week when we start really looking ahead to the Penn State game. Because, look, everything I'm about to say here on this pod, it all has a disclaimer of, look, we made the playoffs anyway. And, yes, I'm extremely happy about that. But the reality is SMU was the better football team on Saturday night. We were 3 or 4 plays away from walking out of there with a statement win over a blue blood program and with a championship ring on our finger. And so it's hard to look at the game and still be happy when you just know how close we were. And I'm really hurting, obviously, for myself, you know, being an alum, but for the guys. I mean, they've fought their ass off all year long. They've played in all kinds of different ball games and they've responded well. And you got to give a shout out to the culture because Clemson came out and they punched us in the mouth, man. It was 21-7 like that. I mean, this team went down early. They got in a hole. There were turnovers, botched punt coverage, and I'm not really sure what happened. This team usually starts fast in big games, and, it's not that SMU is scared or even tight, but I don't know. I think you have a sack that the defense comes up with on their first play, and offensively you have an explosive run on your first play. And so you're looking at those two paired together and you're like, all right, we're going to have some success. But the strip sack on the opening series, you give Clemson a pair of short fields to start the game. They had a 33-yard touchdown drive and a 28-yard touchdown drive their first two series. Really hard to win the first quarter when that happens. And so I wrote this next part pregame. I mean, just the resiliency of the team. Louisville was a really hard-fought game. So was Nevada. So was Duke. And so I knew once this game settled in that the team was going to be able to respond the right way. And thankfully they did. They battled back. They made it a game. And Billy, fortunately, they were able to play really well in the second half, even though it just wasn't enough to come out with a victory.
Yeah, I think there's so many different angles that you can look at this game. There is the perspective of, there's a ring that for a lot of guys they're hurting over that. There should be one ring already being thought of how it's going to get made and sizes and all those things for the banquet eventually, but it didn't end up happening. And that's going to, hurt a lot of guys for a while, just thinking about that, unless they quite honestly win a national championship, and you're still going to talk about it even then. But when you look at the resiliency, you look at how they never gave up. And, Rhett talked about at halftime how they can put together a 30-minute span of plays and playing hard, and it go down in the history books as one of the more memorable things for not only these players, but for SMU fans. And I'm not going to sit here and say that's what's important. They did that because, at the end of the day, they didn't win the game. But when that game ended, I felt for them in a way I felt for them, period, because you had all of that executed. You have this story, this 17-point comeback that is there, and you do it and you accomplish it, and you look like you're going to get to play some free football, and it's going to be for an ACC championship. And just a lack of, this isn't anything but the truth, but quite honestly, a lack of focus execution in the last 9 seconds or so. And that's the difference. Clemson capitalized on it. Dabo Swinney, a lot of people, Eric McClain was talking about it on their post-game pod, how a lot of people were saying, why didn't you got to fair catch this? You got to fair catch this. That's what they were talking about on the sideline. And instead they return it and they make a play. And so when the game does against good teams come down to a select few plays, the Houston game, a few years ago kind of comes back to that for a lot of people. That's, I think, something that as we look ahead to Penn State, SMU can say we can play two things. We can play with anybody in the country. And, okay, this is a lesson of we have to find a way to get back to being as ready to get off the bus and play as we were early in the season, because, even Virginia, Cal, I don't think those games, they scored those opening possessions. So they've got to get back to that. And maybe this is the well-timed wake-up call for SMU to now go on a run.
I certainly hope so. It is fun when this team can get the ball, drive the field, score a touchdown, because this team is built to play from ahead. You have a really talented offensive line and run game, and you play great defense. And so when we're able to do that, we're able to have a lot of success. And it's going to take that to beat Penn State in a couple weeks. That crowd is going to be rocking. That is going to be the loudest crowd SMU has probably ever played in its history. Yeah. And it's going to be an insane environment. I can't wait. I'm excited for the guys to be able to go see that. But similar to the other night where it was a mostly Clemson crowd, guess what? You're going to have double the amount of Nittany Lions fans. But we'll stay here for now. We'll stay with the ACC Championship game because, unfortunately, the other elephant in the room is the penalties. And I think blaming the officials is a way to find an excuse for why we lost this game. The officials are not the reason that SMU lost this game.
Agreed.
Yes, it is tough to see that Clemson had 0 penalties, but if SMU gets off to a fast start, if they, even make a field goal that seemed makeable because Colin Rogers has done it up to this point this year, we're looking at a little bit of a different ball game. Either SMU wins comfortably or Clemson has to do that to tie the game and we still go to overtime. But SMU 6 penalties for 65 yards, definitely an improvement over the 17 that we had a couple weeks ago. Yeah. But the refs are the refs. Rhett Lashley can't go out and openly criticize them. He's going to get fined or some kind of repercussion from the conference. So I'm with you guys as far as the frustration, but at the end of the day, if you learn to blame the officials for SMU's lack of performance, that is learned helplessness. And so on the flip side, SMU can't commit false starts or the snap infraction or whatever you want to call it, illegal men downfield, the personal foul on punt coverage where, it was a fair catch. I know it was early, but there's got to be a way that you're paying attention to that and know to be able to take care of that guy. But the roughing the passer against Cam Robinson, I will say that was actually really bad. He took his arms off of Cade Klubnik. He tried to break the fall. And then KJ took a hit to the head with the crown of the helmet from TJ Parker and no call. And so it felt very one-sided, admittedly, but Clemson's standard is the standard. Even if this game was called fairly, Clemson more than likely still would have had less penalties.
Yeah.
And we talked about it last week. You can't just turn it on and be a penalty-free team when the lights are bright. We're still 131st in the country in penalties. And so you look at Clemson's fourth quarter resiliency, their pretty clean game, their ability to take care of the football and not turn it over. That's just what they do. And that's why they're in the playoff.
And I think there's like problems, like I'm trying to figure out how to explain this, but you have 6 penalties for 65 yards, a much improved situation. Should truly be 5 penalties for 50 yards, but we're getting into, the nitty gritty. I think your point is the biggest thing that I have talked about when you look at this team and trying to not defend the penalties because you can't do them, but when you start fast and you're playing from ahead, and let's say SMU gets points on the opening drive, which would, by the way, I know we're playing a big ifs, ands, or buts game here, but which would then mean that, okay, Kevin Jennings didn't get strip sacked. Maybe Clemson doesn't have a short field. Let's say you just go up 3-0 on that opening drive. All right, cool. You're playing from ahead. You're not playing on your heels. Field position isn't what it is. And there's maybe a different confidence level of this group. And guess what? If Jordan Hudson wants to, I know he didn't mean to, but Jordan Hudson still tackles the guy after he fields the punt. Well, guess what? Okay, Clemson can have a better field position situation, but they're still having to maybe press a little bit because they're down, or they're having to do this or having to do that. It was just one of those things where when you're not ahead of the chains, when you're not playing from ahead and starting fast, those penalties impact the game in a different way where they matter. SMU pulling guys off the pile when it's 21-10 or whatever, and they're up in a game against a conference opponent, probably not a game-changing call because SMU's playing from ahead. The other team's got to chase them. You know what I mean? That's the thing with this team being off of their MO of why they got through a game like Louisville, why they got through certain games throughout their schedule, is their ability to start fast. And then that minimizes some of the other things that, they do. Even you look at the defense at times this year where they kind of have a lull or the offense doesn't score. Well, guess what? You started fast. You're playing from ahead, and then you'll be able to find your groove again and make plays and get up. And SMU they didn't get any of those things done in this game.
We just got off schedule. That's ultimately what killed us, unfortunately. But let's get to the keys of the game real quick. We talked about it last week. The 4 keys for this game that I had, first and foremost, I thought we had to rush over 170 because Clemson's Achilles heel on defense was going to be their run defense. And so ultimately we did not hit the 170 mark, but we were pretty dang close. We had 35 carries, 154 yards on the ground, and the stat was better than it felt with 4.4 yards a carry. But because of being thrown off schedule, there were some times where, I just didn't think we were getting the movement that we were used to. But Clemson's front seven is still really talented. That's 7 guys that are realistically going to play on Sunday or at minimum be on a practice squad somewhere. And so when you get off schedule, like we talked about, Kevin had to have 51 pass attempts to try to claw back into this game. And so it just became a wash, unfortunately. I wish we could have run the ball a little bit more effectively, get a few more rushing touchdowns in that game, because that's been our strength. And then secondly, force errors by Cade Klubnik. I thought that Club Takeaway had to come away with a turnover and win the turnover battle. You look at the end of that game, I kept saying, God, we need a turnover right now. And unfortunately, it just never came. So 0 for 2 for that. You know, we lost turnover battle 2-0 in the first quarter and then the whole game, unfortunately. But there were opportunities for possible interceptions. Clemson put the ball on the ground a couple times, but ultimately they fell on both of them because the ball just bounced their way. And then third, defensive line, I thought needed to have a really good game. They're our strength of our defense, and they did. You know, they held Clemson to 64 rushing yards, and they had 3 sacks. That was awesome to see. And then last, I thought Kevin needed to have a clean game. And if you take away the first quarter, I think he did. You know, I think he did have a really nice performance. He went over 300 yards again. But unfortunately, the costly strip sack, and Nick Saban talked about it on College Game Day, of how he keeps one hand on the ball in the pocket. And while I don't think that was the case, you know, maybe he just could have a little more awareness, but we're in woulda, coulda, shoulda land. And so the interception, though, that's one he's either got to just eat it or throw it to Dabo on the sideline. You know, he was just trying to make something happen, and there was just nobody around. Unfortunately, made a bad play.
Yeah, that interception's the one that I really look at, and I'm like, I mean, if you have TJ Parker coming off the edge for the strip sack, and he's able to get a clean look at whether you have 2 hands on the ball or not, I mean, you've got to be a real strong dude to hold on to that ball when he's coming like that. So tough situation on having one hand on the pocket, and it, you know, wasn't like he was down here like this, you know, kind of really hanging the ball low. He just didn't have 2 hands on the ball. But the interception, that's one that I watched. That one had a great angle on it from our vantage point, and was like, I can't believe in this game where, you know, Rhett Lashley and De'Aaron King are like, hey, in a championship game, you're gonna have to eat some of those. Yeah. And Cade Klubnik, we talked about him before the game, 5 picks all year, and you saw it at times with Cade where probably could have forced something, probably could have tried something, and he had a couple where, you know, could have been picked off by great plays by SMU, but in terms of like just getting rid of it, he did that at every point. I know it was Kevin's one that he wants back, but yeah, like you said, he's got that's a learning experience, you know, for him, because he almost had too much time with how he created a little space with the great play, and you know, just didn't get back to the line or didn't get enough on it to get it out of bounds. I think he was trying to throw it away, and it didn't go, but that's just me.
Fortunately for the future, this is one where this is Kevin's first loss as the full-time starter, you know, not a guy in relief. And he's got a lot to learn from, you know, which is great, because next time we're in this situation, and there will be a next time, I do believe that SMU is going to find its way back to the ACC Championship, or at least, you know, this season. You know, we're going to have another big shot here in 2 weeks in an absolutely massive game. And I think Kevin will be more prepared. He'll have a few more feathers in his cap. He'll have some coaching based off of what just happened, and he'll be hungry to go prove that, hey, you know, I can get the big games done. You know, I can do it. But offensively, total 458 yards, 28 first downs. We were 9 for 18 on third down. Kevin had 304 yards to the air and 154 on the ground, 11 explosive plays. I'm saying all of that, all of those were better than Clemson. Offensively, statistically, we played better than Clemson. It's pretty good offense on the other side of the ball. We're a really good offense too. But the 2 turnovers, like we talked about, the slow start, we went into the half with only 7 on the board, you know, which was down. We're averaging 20 points in the first half so far this year. And so it was just a weird ball game. You know, but other than the first 20 minutes, I don't really know if I have a lot to say. They were pretty efficient. You know, I think they spread the ball around really well. I think Romello was a great addition. He had some really key conversions in this game. Matthew Hibner had another great game in the run and the pass. I was surprised by the drops. That was something that hadn't reared its ugly head this year, and it did, unfortunately, in the worst possible time. But our offensive X factor was Bouchard. He had a nice showing, 113 yards on the ground, 34 through the air, added a touchdown reception, and we did all the statistical things you'd want from an offense in a championship game, but again, minus the turnovers. And so I was proud of that drive at the very end, though. That was one of the greatest drives I think this team has gone on in the last few years.
Oh, yeah.
To go on, tie the ball game. You don't give Clemson a ton of time. 16 seconds, that's pretty much all you can do at that point. And in the second half, yeah, there were 2 punts that, you'd love to convert into points. But realistically, you hit 31 points against Clemson on a regular night. Could have been enough to win.
Yeah, and that Clemson point total that they finished with was the highest that they finished with all year against a team that, like, Pitt, Louisville, Georgia, and I'm missing one, maybe not, but they statistically, in terms of points, just hadn't put up that number this year. And you give them a couple extra possessions with good field position, and you take one of those away, they're below 30. And what do we talk about with the sweet spot with SMU? Rushing yardage. I think have it here. SMU rushed the ball 35 times. All of those things that we talked about. I mean, this is only the second game under Rhett Lashlee that SMU hit 30 points and lost. So out of all those games that Rhett Lashlee and this offensive team have put up points left and right, second game in his entire tenure that they've lost, which is, one, pretty insane, but two, just goes to show you when we talk about hitting some of these different things, that's where it just, the turnovers make that difference. But we're going to try not to harp on the turnovers anymore. That drive that Kevin led them on, 16 plays, I believe 79 yards, masterful. And I got to watch it from the field, and you could see the speed and you could see all the things that had to happen. And you talk about a group, and one point on that drive too is Ja'Kai Clark goes down with a cramp, and J.O. slides over and snaps one snap, and Ben Sparks comes in at right guard. By the way, saw some of the Sparks family before the game. Awesome. Saw a lot of families. Kevin Jennings, RJ Maryland's parents, Hibner's family, others. So sorry if I'm reeling them off and forgot. But, they pick up a first down. Running right behind Ben and J.O. on that play too, I'll add. And those are the type of things that, yes, SMU, final score, they came out on the other side. But those are the type of things that years down the line, they're going to remember. They're going to remember being in that drive, in that moment. I saw Roderick Daniels on Sunday, and then I saw him again before we recorded this pod. And just, it meant a lot to him to catch that touchdown, to do that for Dallas. I'm sure it did for KJ too. And, you just selfishly, both being alums and, covering SMU too, just wish they had that moment where it ended up in a win. But that drive was just unbelievable magic from Kevin, and just all the different things that he did there.
This is my last thing to say before we get onto the tape and we can watch a little bit of what the eye in the sky saw. But ultimately, when I was sitting last night and I was watching it from the end zone shot, we're one block away, or we're one cut away. And there were so many plays where we just left a lot out there, unfortunately, where, I was watching it with Kara and I was like, you take this guy away, it's touchdown. This is a little bit better, it's touchdown. We catch this ball, this is a first down, or things like that. And so we've got the horses to be able to do what it takes to win a championship on offense. We just have to execute at a higher level in the big games, in the big moments, when it matters. So let's get to our key plays from the game. I have to warn the viewers, there is some good and there's also some bad, but you know what? We'll look at exactly what happened on Saturday night. All right, opening play here. So you're always going to be nervous. You're always going to have those butterflies until you get that first play under your belt. So here we go. We're in 11 personnel here. You got Hypner and Roderick, and really you have Bouchard out here to the left as well. Motion Matthew over to your right. You bring Bouchard in from the left. Offensive line is going to zone here to the left. As this is a jet sweep action, we're going to try to outrun 44 here. We get outside of him. Moochie Dixon does a nice job here on the crack block here as he comes inside. Matthew Hypner does a great job on the kick out. Bouchard just gets tripped up. If he didn't get tripped up here, this might have been a touchdown. But you know what? We'll take what we can get here for a nice explosive gain on the very first play. All right, 2nd and 7 here. So not an obvious passing down, but it is something that more than likely you are going to throw the ball. Look, we knew going into this game, this left defensive end here, that's TJ Parker, was going to be an issue. He is a really talented player and a guy that we were going to have to play really well to eliminate him from making an impact in this game. So here, I like Savion, the left tackle's initial hand throw. He does a great job of striking, getting inside hands, but unfortunately he doesn't get a great first kick. It's really almost under himself, and so he has to open his hips early, and elite defensive ends like this turn the corner. This is what they practice. They practice running the hoop, flipping their hips, and unfortunately he does a nice job here. He gets home, gets his hand on the ball, and we cough it up and give Clemson the ball early. All right, back to work here. This was a crucial part of the game. We're down 14-0 at this point. We're trying to put together a drive here. So we're going to have outside zone here to the left. So we're gonna zone to this guy outside of the box. We start in a single between 71 and 53 up to 47. He walks outside of the box. That's fine. Keep your eyes on him. We're still going to work to him. And then on the backside between 51 and 58, we're going to B this to number 0. So we've got numbers here. Matthew Hypner, 88 on the backside. He's the cutoff. And then on the front side here, you got Birdman. He's just a man reach here. So 53 and 71, Ja'Kai and Logan, they do a nice job working to the guy outside the box. The B does a nice job, and Bouchard just rides the wave here, cuts it back at the right point, makes the guy miss, and does a nice job for a 10-yard gain here. All right, same drive here, just a few plays later. So we're going to run one of our counter variations here. So on the right side between J.O. and PJ, you see him talking pre-snap. They're going to deuce this down lineman here to 47. So D lineman goes inside. Great. PJ just keeps climbing up for 47. On the backside, Logan is going to pull here, and he's going to kick out this defensive end. Hypner is going to wrap. He's going to follow Logan's block. He gets around it, does a nice job of kicking out 0 as well to create this lane for Kevin. And then look at our perimeter blocking. Does a nice job by LJ here, number 11. He gets out in space. And then Jordan Hudson, number 8, turns around. Boom! Does a great job springing this run for Kevin so that we're able to get in the end zone for 7. All right, I want to give a quick shout out to Savion. I thought he did a really nice job bouncing back after that early strip sack given up to TJ Parker, because watch this rep here. He does a much better job of getting into his set. He explodes off of that right foot. He stays square, and then he throws his hands. He is really good with his hands. He gets his hands inside regularly, and this rep is no exception. And then once TJ Parker leans on that inside hand, Savion does the right thing by trapping him down. This is not a hold. It would be a hold if he grabbed him and pulled him down, but when he just takes his own weight off of his chest and he's fallen down, that's not a hold. So I actually really love this rep from Savion. I thought it was one of his best of the night because, look, this was a war over on the left side between these two. It's really unfortunate that the center judge here at the bottom of the screen threw a penalty flag because I think this was one of Savion's best reps all season. All right, I just want to talk about the resilience of this offense. Came back from down 24-7 at halftime, all the way back to this play here that tied the game. So we'll start here with the protection. It's a left slide, so you've got left tackle, left guard, and center are really 3 for 3 for the 3 on the left of the hash here. And then your man on the right side with Bouchard scanning. Really like Savion's set here. He jumps, throws his hands, and look, he's dominating TJ Parker at this point in the game. I also like on the right side, I like PJ's set here. He's square, he's patient, he does a nice job throwing his hands. Would like to see him keep his head out of it a little bit, sink his hips, but overall this is a pretty good rep. And then what a ball, what a route here between Roderick and KJ. I mean, Roderick runs a great route, steps on his toes, and gets to the outside. KJ delivers a great ball here to tie this ball game up.
So many of those plays, you get a chance to look at the good, the bad. That might be the first film room where, we really kind of had a little bit of bad too to show them. But, breaking down a championship game is something that we've got to give you every angle, especially when it doesn't go SMU's way. Define what went wrong and how they can get better. And I think the biggest takeaway and last takeaway for me on offense, and then we got to keep moving on to defense. And then of course the college football playoff. But you look at what SMU's offense faced in that front seven against Clemson and how much talent there is on there. Penn State has a lot of talent. They've got Abdul Carter. We'll break a lot of that down. And I'm not minimizing Penn State when I say this. SMU knows now, after this entire season that they've been through, that they can play with any roster in the entire country when they execute their game plan. And Clemson is one of those rosters that, you can say what you want about the portal. You can say what that you want about how they manage all of that. They recruit blue chip guys across the board. So many of those guys I recognize. I'm like, oh man, yeah, he's a former top 50 or 5-star or whatever. Bryant Wesco from Midlothian, legitimately one of the most athletic, freaky receivers. And oh, by the way, a 5-star that I've seen. We'll talk about him. But you have a group of players on SMU's team that the way they play when they're at their best, they can play and execute and move the ball against any roster in America.
And that should give them a lot of confidence. But as we flip over to the other side of the ball, we talked about it last week. This is a really talented Clemson offense as well. And we limited them to 10 points once the bleeding finally stopped. But ultimately, in the first quarter, it was an extremely slippery slope. Cade Klubnik threw 3 first-quarter touchdown passes. And passing is kind of where Clemson lives, breathes, and dies. And they looked good all season. And unfortunately, that didn't change on Saturday night. 24 for 41, 262 yards, 4 touchdowns for Cade Klubnik. Really great showing from the Austin Westlake native. But it was a surprising day from a points perspective, given up from the defense. But you limited the offense yardage-wise to 326 yards. Only 64 of those were on the ground. And then Phil Maffa is an extremely talented back. Held that guy to 2.2 yards a carry. And then 2.0 yards a carry overall for Clemson. So I look at this rush defense, and as they get ready to play a Penn State team who put up almost 300 yards on the ground, and you know what? Let's put your unstoppable force versus our immovable object. Let's put the ball down and let's see what happens, man. I think this defense is going to have tons to obviously correct and fix, and Penn State's watching the same things that Clemson did. But I believe with 2 weeks of preparation and 2 weeks to really get your confidence back and say, hey, you know what? That's a really good offensive line unit that we pushed around. 3 sacks were happening from this defensive line, and there's a play in there to where I don't think you can break it up into a quad sack, but all 4 of our down linemen won almost immediately and just annihilated Klubnik. I mean, that was really fun to watch. But unfortunately, we needed a turnover badly, and it just never came. We weren't able to steal a short field and some points. And then, we did put our hat on the ball a little better than I think we have this season. We made some tackles where you're just putting your face mask on the seams of the rock, and it's coming out. But the ball just bounced Clemson's way. They were able to get both back, and so that was highly unfortunate.
Yeah, those fumbles, and they were great plays by SMU's defense for the most part, good opportunities to get the ball and step late, falling on it the weird way or whatever. Clemson was able to get them back. And I mean, that's football that's being well coached, in those kind of fire sale situations. But, I just think the world of this defense. I still think that despite the 34-point number, I think everybody around the SMU fan base knows they played pretty well. I think the thing that really hurt was you didn't have Jalen Davis Robinson, and he got hurt in practice, I was told last week before the game. And so you have Brandon Crosley out there, you have Deuce Harmon, and they pretty much, and I've not had a chance to check PFF yet, but they pretty much played every snap. And that is really hard when, as we talked about going into the game, you have these gazelles at wide receiver. I mean, TJ Moore, Bryant Wesco. There are other receivers who's really talented as well. Who's more of a veteran guy. TJ and Bryant are 2 freshmen, but I mean, they just have guys that can really run. And when you've got to run with those guys, that takes a lot out of a corner. And on top of them being super talented as well. So I think that's maybe something that will stick out, but we'll look at how that might change against Penn State potentially, just with their receiving core being a little different than Clemson's. But SMU just wasn't able to stop some of those explosive plays. But once they settled in the second half, they got a lot better at it. They were able to take a lot of those away, and they settled in and played SMU football, which they got contributions from most of the usual suspects in that regard.
They weathered the storm, and that was what was ultimately important for this defense. It looked at the end of the first quarter, and I hate to have to admit this, I told Kara, I'm like, please let it be closer than 65-7, because I love this team and believe in everything that they could do. And I'm only saying that because when you play Clemson and you play a team that has that kind of logo on their helmet, most of the time the game is won before the ball's kicked off. And when you go down to a team like that early, Clemson had won their ACC championships in the last 10 years by an average of 24 points. And so you look at that paired with the logo, paired with the prestige, and it would have been really easy for this team to just say, you know what, it's not our night, roll over and just get killed on national TV. And they probably would have gotten left out of the playoffs if that would have happened. But they battled back. They stepped up when it mattered. They made this game feasible for the offense to go down the field and tie the game. And you look at the stats. Kobe Wilson, 15 tackles. Ahmad Moses, 9, and he had 3 passes broken up. Elijah Roberts had, 1.5 sacks, and I think he had 9 pressures in this game. I mean, that was a hell of a showing from our senior leader, and for the second straight conference championship, where he had gotten disrespected a few days right before by not being an all-conference player. And so I love watching third and long when we roll out, Jared Harrison Hunt, Elijah Roberts, you've got Cam coming in the game, you've got Isaiah Smith, and it's just, all right, we're putting our best 4 pass rushers out there, and we're just going to let them go to work.
Yeah.
But it is go ahead.
Yeah, it's when SMU gets people into third and long, I'm just like, okay, who's going to come up with the sack? Because it's really not a question as, are they going to get pressure? It's okay, who's actually the one that's going to get to do a little dance or something after getting the quarterback down? Because, I mean, that is, and I've said this before about this group, there's so much versatility across that defensive line. There's so many different body types. There's so many different skill sets. And what they've figured out in terms of their third and long package is just like that's what, ultimately gets guys paid NIL and coaches raises is having performances like that. And quite frankly, I mean, you talked about it, the talent on that defensive front line for Clemson. You look at that group of 4 going across, wouldn't shock me if all 4 of those guys are playing on Sundays and doing their thing a little bit, in certain roles and all of that. So SMU just, again, when they get in their game, they are really, really hard to beat.
Yeah. I look at a guy like Jordan Miller, who is with the Broncos playing, great player, really glad that he's an SMU Mustang, but you look at the forefront that we've got right now, and all of those guys could be on 53-man rosters next year or whenever their time is up. But what I was going to say is it's just disappointing. Defense has been arguably our identity the last 2 years, but I have a lot of confidence that they're going to bounce back against Penn State. They're going to play right into their wheelhouse as far as running the football. But I do want to cover a few of the defensive plays here to help illustrate a little bit of what happened on Saturday night with this defense. We'll cover the first couple plays. I do have to apologize. I missed a couple where I submitted the wrong clip, and I don't want to show you guys boring stuff that, it's like, oh, this is an inside zone run here. But we'll get to these couple plays first, and we'll be right back. All right, opening play here for this defense. And you know what? Clemson wants to throw the ball early. That's what they build their team on. And so, you know what? We're going to rush the passer here on this first clip. I thought Tank did an excellent job of here pushing the center backwards. He forces Klubnik to step up in the pocket. And you know who gets home? That's the leader of our defense, number 5, Elijah Roberts. And I thought this ball almost came out, and it did. But Klubnik was down. But for Elijah Roberts to get home here on a sack on the opening play of the ball game, I thought we were going to dominate. But you know what? Leave it to our leader to say, you know what? I'm going to take over this game after being snubbed from all conference. Comes up with a big play. All right, I had to pull out the wide angle on this one to be able to really appreciate this clip. Cade Klubnik can move the ball with his legs a little bit too. And so, you know what? We had to respect that. So he takes the ball here, he tucks it, he starts running, but we're just a little bit too aggressive here on the bottom of the screen. As soon as he tucks it, we're going to fill to try to make this tackle. Clemson keeps playing. They get behind the defense. I don't know if this was a scheduled thing or they just saw how wide open he was down the field. But unfortunately, watch the offensive line here. The ball is on the 36-yard line. 3 yards is the limit for illegal man downfield. They're standing on the 31. They're 5 yards down the field here. This should have been an illegal man downfield, but instead it's a Clemson touchdown.
Welcome to Brandon Thomas Volkswagen, where we're proud to be the #1 Volkswagen dealer in the Dallas Metro, thanks to you. So we're giving you 0 down, 0 due at signing, 0 security deposit, and 0 first payment with every 2024 Tiguan 2.0 TS lease. Or get 0% APR for 60 months when you finance, all during the Sign and Drive event.
Visit us today at Brandon Thomas VW in McKinney, located at the corner of Highway 75 and 121.
Home of the Thomas Promise.
All right. Great stuff as always. Breaking down the film. We appreciate our secret crew that helps us do that. So shout out to those people, and Hayden, for you for organizing all that. Look, it's everything that SMU can accomplish is still very much in front of them, right? Like that's now what we can say, because the committee did move SMU or keep SMU into the college football playoff. And I think did the right thing. I mean, I know you think they did the right thing as well. And in part, the reason why SMU has everything in front of it is because this defense, and you look at this bracket, you have an opportunity to play two teams that kind of play a brand of football that, if SMU plays to its strengths on defense, and in particular on defense, okay, offense, you just kind of got to keep your end of the bargain and put up enough points to get it done. And I know I'm oversimplifying, and we'll close out, that Clemson game, but, SMU showed that they have a roster that can play with any team that's in this college football playoff. We know how hotly debated it was. We know how, yes, Georgia has the guys they have, but they also just lost their quarterback too, it sounds like. And so there's a lot of things that are going on with this overall college football playoff that, I mean, I'm not sitting here saying SMU is going to win a national championship, but they can't be discounted either.
I'm so happy the committee did the right thing. I was on a really early flight coming back, and the plane's Wi-Fi was not working. And so I was about to be cooked. I was going to be so upset I couldn't watch the selection show, but we broke through the clouds on the way down. I got signal back and was able to see SMU get picked. And it was great. The plane exploded. Everybody was super happy. But now that it's finally a couple days in the past, I can admit Clemson is a program with a Hall of Fame coach who has built a modern-day dynasty in college football. You don't win 9 ACC championships since 2011, and 8 of those in the last 10 years by accident. Clemson is an NFL factory who gets great recruits, and want to also give a shout-out to Dabo for his ability to project high school players. This is not a program that takes a bunch of transfer portal guys. He's taking 18-year-olds and projecting how they're going to be when they're 22, 23 years old. And so they have an outstanding culture. They're coached extremely well, but SMU is the better team. SMU did not have the championship experience that ultimately allowed Clemson to win this game. I am proud that SMU weathered this storm. They fought back, and I'm excited to see how this group responds. This group has been really good out of the bye week so far this year. And while it's not a bye in the college football playoff, they still get a week off this weekend with a chance to recover and regroup and then get back to work. But unfortunately, ACC champs is going to have to wait one more year.
Yeah, it's time for the playoffs, though. And let's jump into coast to coast as SMU, had to, get through its conference championship game by playing well enough to get in. And they did that. Other games across the country, you had Boise State beating UNLV, and that is a team that is now in SMU's bracket. If SMU beats Penn State, they'll be playing New Year's Eve in Glendale, Arizona in the Fiesta Bowl, just like we were all hoping SMU would be playing on a New Year's Six Bowl. But instead, if they do beat Penn State, they got to go all the way out to Arizona to play the Boise State Broncos there, a team that is familiar with the Fiesta Bowl, of course.
This was a nasty night in Boise, Idaho, and they just kept feeding Ashton Jeanty. I mean, he had over 200 yards on 32 carries. I mean, and he's led his team to the playoff. He deserves the Heisman, in my opinion. If it wasn't for Ashton Jeanty, Boise State would not be in the playoff, or at least they wouldn't be the dominant team that they have been all year long. Their only loss, may I remind you, is to the number one team in the country by one score. And so Boise is an extremely dangerous team. But back to Jeanty real quick. I loved his post-game interview. Christian gave credit to God, gave credit to his offensive line. I mean, you got to love a guy like that. But if SMU doesn't end up win the whole thing, I do hope Boise State does. I think that would be awesome. It would be really cool for a group of 5 team to go deep the way that they have. And I think eventually, with conference realignment not being over, I think Boise State eventually joins us in a Power 4 conference. But in our old conference, in the American, first year in, Army Black Knights win the AAC in year 1, and Tulane, unfortunately, loses second straight conference championship. But you got to give credit to both head coaches. Of course, John Summerall has done an incredible job at Tulane with taking a job where, yes, you're going to championships and really maintaining that level of consistency. And then Coach Monken at Army, you can never count out the Army Black Knights.
Yeah. And I mean, they jumped out, on them too. I mean, it wasn't a game that was looking very good. And look, there were rumors around John Summerall, his, interest in a UNC job that, like, I said it on the board. I mean, a lot of people were telling me, I mean, this thing is over and he is going to be headed to UNC. And look, you say something, I put it on the message board. I didn't say anything on Twitter, just not trying to do that on the morning of a conference championship. And it did end up getting picked up for some stuff around Blake Baker. But, I think I kind of feel better about it, like that I said that in a sense, because one, UNC's coaching search, this comes from right there in Raleigh. One of the reporters, Brian Murphy, tweeted this out a little while ago, says the UNC football coaching search is not wrapped up because of antics of board members inserting themselves into the process, a senior administrator tells me, which is, one, first of all, wild. And SMU fans feel validated that you were saying the entire time that SMU is a better job than UNC for a football coach, at least. And I think that that's what happened. I again was told that he was starting to assemble staff, get things in order. And, when he got to it Saturday, things fell apart. And that's when Sunday night, the news broke that he was going to end up staying. So just a wild time on the coaching search carousel. But look, you hear a lot of things. I decided to share something. And John Summerall is going to be right back at Tulane next year. And he's got a little extension and some help for his staff as well. So I like to see Tulane do well. I think it's good just for kind of SMU's area and another small private making some noise. But I will say, Hayden, about Boise, SMU needs Clemson to go deep.
Yeah.
That's more money for the ACC. It's more money to dish out. So we've got to do the SEC thing and really band together on the conference front. But
I think they would meet in the Natty.
Yes, exactly. So we can get the best of both worlds.
Yeah. There you go.
So,
but
to that, SMU got a bunch of money by making the college football playoff. So
I think $4 million is what I heard. Is that right?
Yep, $4 million for making it. So pretty big deal right there. So a little recoup back there for everybody giving up the hundreds of millions of dollars. So
yeah, there you go. A good ROI there.
Yeah.
But on the coaching carousel, real quick, Scott Frost rehired as UCF head coach 7 years after leaving for Nebraska, following that, just legendary undefeated season, capped off by the Peach Bowl win, where they crowned themselves national champions. If you've ever been to Orlando, if you've ever been to a UCF Knights game, they've got it plastered all over the stadium. But he said something that was pretty cool in his interview, or in the interview after he was hired. they were asking what it means to be back. And he talked about when you're climbing the ladder of success, nobody ever stops to tell you, hey, this is when you're going to be really happy. And so you can tell Scott Frost is excited to be back. You can tell that he wants to bring that program right back to where he left it. But he did make a joke that don't expect us to go undefeated in year one. So we'll see how it works out for UCF. Obviously, they're in the truck stop conference, so they're still a little bit of our rivals, even though we don't play them now. But I don't know. I think it's cool that they brought him back. I do think he'll have success there again, as Gus Malzahn now left to be Florida State's offensive coordinator.
Yeah, the coaching carousel is most definitely heating up. I will say this, one interesting piece of all of this is as we'll be tracking, potential promotions. I mean, Johnny Brewer got promoted, got the Duke job last year. SMU's not out of the woods. I will say Scott Simons, barring something absolutely insane happening, he's going to be here at SMU next year. And I know, I do know he's gotten an extension. He's got things situated on that front to make that happen. So kudos to everybody involved to do that. But when you look at this overall coaching carousel, one thing to watch is these group of 5 jobs. And there are so few that are really good for, college coaches to have. There are a lot of these group of 5 jobs that you just got to feel for. I don't want to say who they're going to hire because I don't want to, I'm not trying to take a shot at like coaches that are getting opportunities to be head coaches, make a job better, do all those things. But I think it was Florida Atlantic or maybe FIU's hiring Duke's running backs coach. I'm sure he's great. I'm sure he's a good guy. It's really hard to hire coaches that, like, the days of rising stars as coordinators going and taking a group of 5 job, they're probably starting to like dwindle a little bit, unless it's a really, really good job and a job that's proven to be, producing a winner kind of on a high. And that's unfortunate because there's a lot of proud programs in the group of 5 ranks. Of course, SMU was just one of them, but it's going to be kind of wild to watch some schools make certain hires over the course of this process. And like Gus Malzahn just showed, like, I know it's UCF and I know he was maybe on the outs, but you still leave a head coaching job to go be an offensive coordinator. It's kind of a sign of the times being wild.
For sure. Yeah, like UMass hired Rutgers defensive coordinator. That's not exactly an inspiring hire, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Conference championships go. Georgia obviously defeats Texas in overtime.
Crazy.
Carson Beck gets hurt. They bring the backup in, and the backup goes down, takes a hit to the head. They bring limp-armed Carson Beck back in the game to hand the ball off a couple times to beat Texas. But Texas has looked really good. They've looked almost unbeatable, except against Georgia. Georgia's just got their number the same way that Alabama's got Georgia's number. And so the SEC just has those kind of rivalries to where, again, they destroyed themselves. Everybody beat everybody. They were all 2-loss teams, and so that's why ultimately when Alabama, who loses to 2 6-6 programs, gets left out.
Yeah. And I mean, look, the committee, I go back to this. The committee did the right thing. And I think somebody on the playoff show said it, that this was a Supreme Court ruling. And they ruled in favor of conference championship games.
Yep.
Because if they ruled that, if they left SMU out, ACC is either totally revamping who plays in that ACC championship game, or they're doing away with it completely and the playoff expands to 16 teams, which I don't think either one of those things are off the table.
Yeah.
Like, if you're the ACC, if you're any league, do you not, and then we can end with that, and we'll talk a lot about maybe playoff predictions next week on the pod when we preview Penn State.
Yeah.
But do you think that there's a world where now a conference might say, okay, we have Clemson and SMU playing in the ACC championship. They are currently in the college football playoff by their seeding. Why should they play?
Basically make it exempt and the 3 and 4 play, or you just cancel the game.
Yeah, you could do the 3 and 4 play. You can't cancel the game. You can't because contracts, but you got to find a way where, okay, you protect your team and your league, because those schools also, if they make the playoff, bring in so much more money for the conference, let alone the success initiatives for ACC teams of getting in.
Make it like basketball. You have a regular season champion and a conference tournament champion.
Yeah. But like, and Rhett was right. If SMU didn't play, they're in.
Yeah.
Like they're unequivocally in. So if you're the SEC, for example, and you say, okay, Texas and Georgia are in, they're not going to play. Alabama and I don't even know if Alabama would have been up next, but Alabama and Ole Miss, or Alabama and South Carolina, or Ole Miss and South Carolina, they've got to play because they're going to get another data point now.
Right. I think it's so unfair that Notre Dame, who refuses to join a conference except the COVID year, that they can coast to 11-1 where their loss is to a bad Group of 5 team. And as long as they finish with 11 wins, they're in the playoff every year. It does not matter anymore because they don't play in a conference championship. They have nothing to lose. I mean, yes, they had a really good showing against USC in their last regular season game. And so they're going to be a tough out for Indiana. It's going to be a really snowy, cold, crappy game in South Bend. But they're in the playoff because they don't have to worry about that ever. And so it's unfair. I think it's just aged past due now for conference championships with the way that the playoff is set up. And I don't really think it's done expanding either because of all the noise, made by Nick Saban, now made by Lane Kiffin, is also adding into that about how SMU doesn't deserve it. But look, the key to getting to the playoff, in my opinion, is simple. If you're a Power 4 football team, win the games you're supposed to and play well in the games that you're not supposed to, because SMU losing by 6 points is a much better resume than your 3 upset losses.
Yeah, 100%. So, all right, my friend, we had a great time in Charlotte before the game, and I know the game was still, look, I was lucky enough to be on ACC Network this week, and Mark Packer's seen a bunch of them, seen them all. He said it was the best ACC championship game he's ever seen. So, granted, it didn't go SMU's way, but a really, really cool moment for SMU fans to at least see that team come back, show the heart and all that. It's going to hurt for a while, but look, SMU's an ACC blue blood, right? Got it?
Got it.
This is a team that is going to be around a long time in this conference, making noise and being a thorn in, Clemson and other schools' side. I mean, the way they recruit, the way they retain, and they got a great coaching staff at the helm running this thing. So, you got anything else?
I can't wait to go back to Clemson, Billy. We've already planned our trip next year. Hopefully get some revenge. But first, you got another blue blood. You got Penn State waiting on the horizon. And we'll get to that, later on. We'll look ahead to the playoff. But I'm just thankful that SMU is in the playoff. They get to show off on a national stage of what they bring to the table, and we'll see what happens. But proud of Rhett, proud of all the guys. Thought they battled their ass off. I said it was going to be a 60-minute war, and it was. And so proud of the resiliency of this team, and ultimately I'm proud to be an alum. Yeah.
Before we go, guys, we are going to remind you guys to reach out to our friends at AKM Turf and Greens. Go to akmturfandgreens.com today. Get your backyard set up looking this elite. If you're watching on YouTube, just an incredible spread with the putting green right there with the outdoor entertainment area. It's that time of year. It's still, warm enough where you can go out there and putt and do all those things during the day. Code PONYUP gets you $500 off your project today. So reshape your backyard with our friends at AKM Turf and Greens. For Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody. We'll catch you guys next week as we preview a college football playoff game for SMU as they do take on the Penn State Nittany Lions December 21st in State College at 11 a.m. Central on TNT. So how about that for a little wild card there? Get to be on TNT. But for Hayden Howerton, I'm Billy Embody. We'll catch you guys next time. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the On the Pony Express podcast with Billy Embody. Follow us on your socials on X at SMU on 3 and on Instagram at on3SMU. And keep it locked to ontheponyexpress.com for more coverage.